morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Rahim Gulamali with my 2 Cents podcast. This week we're going to talk about downsizing on a double bubble. And I've got someone gorgeous on the other side of the phone, Adele. Kim, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Of course, and lovely to be here. Morning to everybody, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. So my name's Adele Platts. I now am a leadership coach, but that's off the back of nearly 30-year career in corporate life, in the last few years doing major transformation and restructure for organisations, which is, I guess, why I'm here to chat to you about this particular subject today.
Cool. So before we start, I want to give a bit of a setting around this topic. What I've been reading about in the news and online on social media, a lot of surveys are telling us that executives are, especially in the US, still half of them is going to invest a lot more into the company and to the digital workspace. However, if you look in Europe, only 16% of the executives expect to invest more. The majority actually expect that they have to go to the second level of downsizing their organization. And I can imagine that has a major impact on those organizations. At the same time, we are currently running into the third wave. In the UK, it's horrible. I'm glad I'm not in the UK.
Yeah, I'm glad.
But I will say the same things happening in Holland, here in Spain, where I'm located. It's a massive increase with the COVID. And looking then at the employment rate or the unemployment rate, it actually is currently not going up. It's not getting worse. But as we all know, there are a lot of zombie companies. The governments are doing a lot of things. What do you see if you look moving forward in this year? When you downsize as an organization, and there is predominantly looking at leaders, I've seen some bad examples of re-engineering, as I've been a re-engineering guy myself in the early years. But what do you expect in the next 12 months? What's going to happen, and how can leaders prepare themselves for that?
Great question. So I think in the next 12 months, we are going to see a lot more change. I think a lot of that is going to require companies to probably downsize or restructure or reconsider the skill set that they've got. There was the World Economic Forum's report back in 2018 that talked about the skills that would be required and as we adopt more digitalization, more automation. And their view was that by 2022, that 54% of the global workforce would need to be reskilled or upskilled in some form. That's quite a number. But that was, back then. What we're seeing with the pandemic is that actually all of those predictions are kind of coming into fruition, but they're just coming in faster with more pace because the pandemic is forcing people to move into that automation and that digitalization because we can't interact with each other. But that brings with it a brand new leadership challenge. And then you add into that, how do I actually now navigate my way through restructuring as the leader? And having had to do this a number of times, it's a real challenge for people because what happens is you kind of go a little bit inward. You kind of look at it and go, I'm going to need to downsize. I'm going to have to take away people's jobs, their way of living, their stability. And that's not nice. That's not nice for anybody. So I know that I feel guilty. I feel guilty that actually I've not been able to lead us into a different position, even though we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So there's a lot of this is not our fault. There will still be that piece of blame and that little bit of shame. The second thing is that your message is not going to be well received. Nobody ever really went, woohoo, redundancy, where do I sign? So it's not going to be well received. So now I feel a little bit guilty. And on top of that, I actually feel a little bit like I'm going to be under attack because my message is not going to go down well. So the best form of defense is attack. And what happens is those leaders, you change your tone, you change some of the words that you use, and all of a sudden you come across as really cold, really heartless, and the people get severely impacted. What you've got to look at instead is the people that are being made redundant, it's not because of them. So I remember doing a big redundancy program for an organization once and standing up in front of the people and saying, the first thing I need you to understand that is this is not about you. And let me explain what I mean by that. It's not about you, but it's happening to you. So you are the ones impacted. You are the ones that are going to, unfortunately, have to live with the message that I'm about to deliver. But the reason I say it's not about you is this is not because you're not a great employee. This is not because you're not really skilled. This is not because I wouldn't love to have you work for me, for as long as you wanted to, for the rest of your life. This is because the organization cannot afford to keep you. And the reason that I give you that distinction is if we're not careful, you're going to think it was because you weren't good enough, because you weren't likable enough, because you weren't productive enough. And that's never the reason, because if that were the reason, I would have been performance managing you. The reality is I couldn't lead us to a better position. And my job as a leader, everybody's job as a leader, is to save as many jobs as they possibly can. And right now I can't save them all. So I have to do the downsizing to give the organization and the people in it the chance to survive so that I can come back and grow. And at that point, I'd love you to come back. And that's why it's really important to me that you know that it's not about you. Now, that's an uncomfortable space to sit in, to stand there and go, do you know what? I didn't lead us well enough and you're impacted. But what it does is allow those people to have the dignity and respect that they deserve, because it's not their fault either. The people usually that unfortunately end up being made redundant are often at the entry level of the organisation. So there was nothing that they were going to be able to do to turn the oil tanker that was the organisation. But if you consider carefully how you manage the exit, it has massive impacts for you, for your, not only you as the leader, but also the organisation when it comes to brand and engagement. Because if you handle it badly, and sometimes we do this, and likewise, I've seen lots of people handle it really badly. What happens is the people that stay, they stay with a bad taste in their mouth, because yes, you had to downsize, but did you have to be so disrespectful to their friends and colleagues? And that makes them think you'd do the same to them tomorrow if you needed to. So they often will then start looking for other employment straight away because they don't want to be in there. So now, potentially, the people that you really need to be able to give the company a chance of survival are going to start exiting. And then what do you do to be able to maintain your organisation? And I guess for me, the other thing that I see organisations do often is they focus on today's problem. So what do I need to do, look like to solve today's problem? But again, that's quite short-sighted, because if you're only looking at today's problem, you're not building yourself the future structure, infrastructure, and knowledge to be able to deliver tomorrow's problem. So actually, you're putting yourself at risk at constantly having to restructure because you're not building your future capability.
I actually find this one actually quite interesting, because in a lot of restructuring, if I look at the companies I'm currently mentoring, I've got a few companies in the travel tech, which they actually have been hit really hard. The interesting is that in one of the use cases I've been working with, they didn't fire the let's say the workers, the people who are actually doing the work, but they fired the middle layer. Mm-hmm. And that's actually quite interesting one. And I was really quite surprised when I heard that, because when firing the middle layer, as this was also a scale up, you also fire the only knowledge you have within the organization. So I think this is a great example of where do you cut and how will that impact your future state of your organization?
It is, and working that out, it's really hard to do, but it's worth putting that effort in to actually say, where should I make the cuts and where do I need to make the investments? And actually look at the people you've got, and some of them might be a case of it's the role that needs to be cut, not the person, because could I redeploy them somewhere else? Could I take that skill set and put it somewhere else as well? But if not, if you don't do that work, if you don't do that understanding, you fall foul of actually losing something you really needed. because you've got to kind of say, okay, what do I need today to survive? What do I need to be able to do to just keep going? And how lean could I make that? And then actually, what space have I got to do small amount of investment to do the things that I know I need to do to remain relevant tomorrow? Because if not, you just end up in this cycle of having to downsize again and again. And I've done that in organizations that have faced the need to do that numerous times. And it's just crippling. It's crippling for the organization, but it's crippling for the leader and the leaders that actually have to manage that through, because it's not only delivering the message, it's then how do you re-engage those people and re-enthuse them on the other side? Because the fact that they just survived the bullet is not an engagement strategy. They're going to feel very nervous that this might happen again. Their job security actually isn't great. Yes, they've got one and other people have gone, but that doesn't make them feel that safe, because what confidence have they got that you're able to grow again, that they're able to, to continue to go? And if all signs of any future activity are taken out, that leaves people with the belief that you're not certain of your future. So it's often
maybe tap a little bit in on this one, because you were talking about leaders. We moved quite quickly in between the topics, but we were talking about leaders. Do you feel leaders in today's business, and I'm going to generalize just generalize, because there will be people who are really good at it, but do you feel that leaders are equipped of leading these kind of changes?
Not all of them. So some people are, some people aren't. But I think a large part of it is, as leaders, for a lot of years, people got promoted because of their IQ, because of their intelligence, because of their acumen, but their emotional intelligence might not necessarily have been so high, because it wasn't deemed to be perhaps as important. But as the world's evolved, actually our ability to connect emotionally with our people has become significantly more important, and more important still when we layer in the new generations. So, when we look at what millennials are looking for from a leadership team versus perhaps what we were expecting from leaders for my generation, for example, or for the baby boomers, they're very different things, because we're evolving, and we're now expecting the people to treat us as human beings. At our base level, everybody wants to be listened to, understood, and respected. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't disagree with people. It doesn't mean to say that you can't make commercial decisions, that you can't have to make cuts or make transformational changes. But it's about saying, even when I'm doing those, am I holding the space for the people where I'm treating them, I'm listening to them, I'm seeking to understand them, and I'm treating them with respect. I'm helping them through that transition. Because if you do that, even at the point that they leave, and I know this, I've had this happen for me, because they felt respected, they will respect you. I had people hug me on the last day, and I was like, you do know I did this. And I'm not saying that because I want the world to think I'm harsh and evil, but I believe that those people had the right to look the person in the eye that was involved in making the decision and was leading that change, and to know that they were being talked to with the person who was accountable. And they said, yeah, we know you did. You were very clear on that, but you treated us with respect. You listened to us. You turned up every week and asked us, how's it feeling right now? Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what's going on in your head, because often they're off over here in a story. And it's like, that's not true. That's not what's happened. This is what happened. And actually, facts are your friends. So let's bring it back to the facts and let's keep going. But don't take this into your future as being about you, as you not being good enough. But I think for as leaders, who teaches you that? Where are we spending our time investing in our leaders and helping them connect with their emotional intelligence and really get comfortable with sharing some of their own vulnerability? Because we've been told for years, don't be vulnerable. But the reality is there is possibly, for every person in the world, something that they're vulnerable about. something that they hope nobody notices, nobody knows, nobody finds out. So if you think that's the one thing that links us all together, the point in leadership is, how do you learn the skill to share your vulnerability without losing your credibility? And that's a real balancing act. But once you do that, what you do is you create a safe space for people to share their vulnerability, which allows your team to be able to genuinely tell you what's going on, what's working, what's not working. And it gives you the chance to help them. But whilst you're not sharing any vulnerability, what you're basically saying to people is, it's not okay to be vulnerable. And that undermines your ability to create a fully engaged culture. And layer on top of that, you've just done a restructure, or you've just had to downsize, and that disconnect between you and your people gets greater. But these are skills that we're not currently teaching. I mean, there was a report recently that I think showed that 69% of millennials are currently looking for new employment because of the lack of investment in leadership development. So they're seeing that disconnect. And yet one of the things that we know, certainly from the work I've done and the boards I've sat on, is one of the challenges that is true for all organizations is the ability to either attract or retain top talent. Now, you put yourself in a position of downsizing, restructuring, any form of transformational change like that, and that becomes even more crucial. And this is where it becomes an even tougher space for leaders, because sometimes you unfortunately do have to remove some roles and some people that you would love to have work for you in a normal situation. And you have to invest some of that in bringing in new people. And how do you do that? How do you attract that talent in when you're just letting talent go? And I think a lot of that is about your ability to have a really cohesive story that's really honest, really transparent, that you can talk to your people and also talk to the wider environment, because, you know, these things don't happen in a vacuum. What's going on for you and your organization and your people will be being viewed by your people, by their families, by your clients, by your competitors, by the market as a whole. And there's sometimes things that we forget, which is actually, how is the way I'm handling it going to show, what light is it going to show me in? What impact is that going to have? Because if you don't consider that as well, one of the other consequences of what you do is that actually you've damaged that reputation so that you lose more clients. You have, your competitors can take your space, and actually your talented colleagues start leaving. So I think you've got to
maybe in addition to what you were telling me, because I'm a bit tapping back on what you said before. You just now mentioned about leaders and what they should be doing, showing vulnerability, the emotions, the EQ, IQ stuff. If I actually look at a lot of leaders I know from my career, I worked for a lot of international organizations. The way we did reengineering was actually quite simple. You got into the office on Monday morning. There was someone from HR waiting for you at the reception. You'll be pulled into an office. You could give your laptop and all your stuff you have to hand in. Then you got about 5 minutes, an explanation on the why. And then you left and you got your severance pay or whatever happened afterwards. Those times have changed. You can't do that anymore. Yeah. Although in the US, I think it's still normal. I still hear those ways of doing it going. But one thing you touched me just now on vulnerability of a leader. How does a leader identify, and I think this is going to go back to really leadership, how would I as leader of a team identify if I'm showing the right level of emotion and can show myself and put myself out there in a vulnerable state? Because I think this is a key thing. We all think and say we do it, but what can we do to improve that skill?
And it's a great point, because it is the thing that, it goes against everything we've been taught, which is, oh my God, if I show I'm vulnerable, then basically I'm going to, I'm at risk. I'm putting myself at risk. I'm putting myself in that space. But actually, it's about identifying how much of that you can do. So as an example, I spent many years in corporate life, terrified that people would find out I was a hairdresser. That was my vulnerability. It's like that people would go, she's not qualified, she shouldn't be here, she's just a hairdresser. I hadn't been a hairdresser for 20 odd years. You could actually say, I only did that until my early 20s. That's when most people are at university. They don't class themselves as a university student for the rest of their lives because they went there. But that was the label that I had. And therefore I wouldn't share it. And then I realized one day that actually sharing it was a real superpower, because for all of those people that I was trying to lead across mass organizations, there would be people in there that doubted that they had what it took to do whatever it was. And it's like, look, if this helps you, I have an MVQ in hairdressing and that's it. That hasn't stopped me from being able to build a 25 plus year career in financial services and IT software up to board level. So whatever it is you're telling yourself right now that you can't do, don't tell yourself that. Don't allow the label that you've put on yourself to be the thing that stops you from succeeding. Now, that could have backfired massively. You put yourself out there and go, I've just told everybody I'm a hairdresser. If anybody actually thinks I'm incompetent, they're going to go, we knew it. That's why she was incompetent. But it was that piece of saying, actually, sharing my vulnerability, that's where I started. What was my biggest risk? So my risk was that people might go, oh, well, she shouldn't have got the job. Well, they'd only think I shouldn't have got the job if actually what I'm doing today isn't credible. Now, I have a 25 plus year career working up to board level, so I know I'm credible. So actually, why not share that? So there was an element of saying, actually, I'm sharing this with you because if you think you don't have the right degree, you don't have the right skills, you don't have the right this, that's not a good enough reason not to keep going. What you need to do is share that and say, I would really like to go here. I don't think I have this yet. How might I get it? What could I do to be able to get me there? If I'd have just started with my MVQ in hairdressing and say, I want to be, board level leader in corporate life, I probably would still be hairdressing because there's no plan on that. Instead, what you had to look at is go, what do I need to do? What do I need to learn? But equally, what have I got right now that they need? And actually, for me, one of the things that made me so successful in what I did was, as a hairdresser, what they teach you to do is listen to people, to understand what's really important to them, and then to try and create it. Because the only real difference between, one hairdresser or the other is the experience that you deliver. As long as you're good, as long as you're good at cutting, if you can deliver a good experience, the customer's going to keep coming back. That's true of our people. Because I think for me, this is the simple truth in organizations that I think we miss. We've had user experience, customer experience. If we're lucky, we have colleague experience. But for me, it all pulls back to, we're all human beings. Every client is a human. At some point, somebody in that organization is a human. Every colleague is a human. In the company that we're in, we're all human beings. So if we seek to look at what is the human experience that I'm looking to create, what is the human experience that they want, and marry the two up, then actually everything else becomes really simple. Because people connect on that, but we don't. Instead we go, oh, they are a bank, they are accounting software. Well, no, they're not. The person that got up and went into the building in the morning is not a bank. They work for one. And I think once we can get back to the fact that we're people having relationships with people. So actually, if I'm the leader of people, what's the relationship that I'm trying to build, and how do I invest in that, and how do they invest in that? If I'm dealing with a third-party supplier, what's the person that I'm dealing with in that organization? What's important to them? What's important to me? And how do we build it? Same with our clients. And once we learn that as a leadership skill, and we can demonstrate that to our people, they can learn it to do in the roles that we want them to do. And that's, I think, when we start to thrive. But it will involve us turning the switch on how we approach leadership, because for years what we've looked at as an organization is, what do I need from my people to be successful? So, what do I need from them? What objectives am I setting?
I love the part around the experience. I'm a customer experience fan. Everything I do is customer experience. I put a client, and the client could be my team member. Yeah. Anyone who's in front of me is, for me, always want to define what is the experience I want to give that person without losing myself. And that's an important one.
Oh, it is.
If you push yourself away and deliver an experience, it's not real. It's not true.
No, it's got to be. But I think that's about, for me, I guess that's why it's the human piece, because actually for me, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if actually all you're doing is giving, and you're not getting anything, that's going to fail as well. That's not going to work. So it's about being honest around it and saying, okay, what is it I need from you to give me safety? And what is it you need from me to thrive? Because we are in a relationship. It might be a leader and colleague piece, but you're still in a relationship, but it's building that part. But what we've done is we've gone at it and gone, what do I need from these people to be successful? What part do they need to play? But it's asking ourselves the next question, and actually not asking ourselves, asking them. So if I need this from you, what is it you need from me for you to thrive? Because actually this is our negotiation. And I've always looked at it to say, it's very similar to you, that my people are my customers. If they don't need what I'm selling, they won't continue to buy from me, or they won't continue to work for me, if we were to take it out of that kind of like client and provider space. So actually, if I don't spend enough time saying to them, what I need from you is for you to hit these objectives to enable the business to be successful. What I need to know from you is, what do you need from me to enable you to do that? And I'm not talking salary. I'm talking kind of what experience do you need to deliver? What training do you need? What skills do you need? What support do you need? What environment do you need me to create for you to enable you to be at your best? And I think it's getting comfortable with saying to people, as the leader, it's my job to say, we're going to Edinburgh. That's where we're going. That's the goal. Edinburgh's the goal. It's not my role to define how we get there, because if I think it is, then actually I'm going to become victim to my own blind spots. And we all have blind spots for a reason. We're blind to them. So instead, by saying to people, look, we're going to Edinburgh, what I need from you is to help me understand, what do we think is the best route, but also what are the alternate routes? So we thought we were going to go on an aeroplane, but actually something's come up and we can't go on the aeroplane now. What's our fallback? What other things could we do? We went on a train, the train didn't work down, the car broke down. What do we do now? What are our other options? Because in approaching it that way, what you do is you give your people the freedom to put their ideas in, to say, that's great, we can do that. But if this were to happen, might we be able to do this? What that does is put everybody in a place of being able to share with us their ideas. Because the thing is, we look at life and we assume that we are all viewing things the same way. And I use this with clients all of the time. If I were to hold that up and say, we're looking at the same book, is there anything written on the cover? And if I said there's nothing at all written on the cover, would you say I'm right or I'm wrong?
Wrong.
But if I turn it round for where I can see, there is nothing written on the cover. We're looking at exactly the same thing, but we're viewing it from a different perspective. That is true of every individual in your organization. They're looking at the same thing, but from a different perspective. You harness that and you no longer have blind spots, because they can see the thing that you can't see. And it's how do we upskill leaders to be comfortable that actually they can engage with that and it doesn't make them wrong? Because this is what we've done. We've made it, because we look for trying to be right. So I could have argued at you, Rahim, to say, no, there's nothing on the cover, because I want to make myself right. But the reality is, just because I was right didn't make you wrong. Just because you were right didn't make me wrong. And if we can get that into our leadership population, if we can get them to understand that and upskill them to be comfortable in that space, that because their right doesn't make the other person wrong, this is not a competition, it's a collaboration, then actually that's going to be where organizations thrive. And I think for me, that is the leadership change that's coming. And we're going to have to train for that, because that is a big shift for people, and they're going to have to go through that change curve themselves. And we need to give them the skills and the support to do that.
I agree fully. So, bit back to the topic. So we were talking about downsizing on the double bubble. So
yes.
We already did downsizing. I think in March there were a lot of. I was reading back into some socials and some Gartner studies, and it actually started around March. The first downsizing. We had a second wave around September, where organizations stopped investing until the end of the year. Beginning of the year, we see more and more companies starting to invest, but at the same time, with the third wave, they are still re-engineering. If I would be looking towards, let's say, the next 6 months, a lot of leaders already had two waves of re-engineering, so they already have quite some lessons learned, I hope, for them moving forward.
Yeah.
If you look at the next 6 months, what if you are a leader now, you don't have that experience, what will be your 3 to 5 pointers, looking at themselves and at what they have to do? What are your top 5? Take care of these top 5 and you're not smooth sailing, but you're going to be close.
Yeah. So I'd say the first one is to look at what support have you got, and does it address what you need? Because it's a bit like the old adage that you put the oxygen mask on yourself first. If you've not got the support you need, then you're not going to be able to give that support to other people. So recognize that part first. The second one is to be really honest with yourself. How well do you think you are engaging your people right now? And if you're not engaging them, and look for some signs, look for how often, when was the last time you phoned somebody up and asked them how they are? How are they coping right now? How does it feel? Have they got everything that they need? Or have you gone into that place of just talking about the task? Also, look at what skills do you need from your team, not just today, but tomorrow? And actually identify them first. And then the fourth step, I would say, is implement a plan to make that happen. Now, if you're time poor or you're money strapped, or both, as we know a lot are in these spaces, look for what's available online for free. The beauty, I guess, of the pandemic is a lot of people with a lot of knowledge are giving away free training, free webinars, free Skillshare. So don't use lack of money as a barrier to either upskilling yourself or upskilling your people. And I think the fifth one is talk to your people. Start creating that space where you listen to them. Listen really effectively. So what we've done is we've learned to listen, to interject. Because the best way I can tell you that I'm listening to you is to jump straight back in there and try and help. Really try hard to upskill your listening to just listen to understand. If you master just that one skill, if you master just listening to understand and holding that space for people, you'll be amazed at what you learn. And it will give you some amazing nuggets that will make you and your people more successful. So if you don't do any of the other four, really work on your listening skills and holding the silence. We often, as leaders, leap in because we want to try and help. We want to support our people. But actually, sometimes all that person wants is you to hold the silence for them, to give them the thinking time to get to the thing that's really bothering them. And if you don't get comfortable with listening to understand and holding the silence, what happens is you will only ever be addressing symptoms, never get to cause. And that can be a really tiring place. But find someone who will do the same for you, because you need to recognize that you need what it is that you're delivering to other people as well.
On that bombshell, especially the last one, I love it, listening to understand. We had that chat already before a few times, and I really love that statement. Last time we even put it online on socials. We're running out of time, so I want to thank you for this session. For the people who are listening to this podcast, Kim is one of the associates within the DNA and Associates portal, the team, I should say. Kim is responsible for all our cultural transformation, especially on the executive level. Kim, can you tell a little about the solutions you have within our platform and what you can do for them and how they can find you moving forward if they're interested in having a chat?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a number of pre-designed packages. So we do a mastermind group, so you can do peer-to-peer learning. We do individual one-to-one coaching. And I also run a number of training programs to upskill leaders specifically around engaging and enthusing and empowering their people at times of crisis or in the remote world. They're all tailored. But the other thing that we can do is tailor what it is that you need. So I can give you an off-the-shelf package, but probably what is more important is to have a conversation and say, what's going on for you now? Back to that whole listening to understand is really important to me. So I guess the bit I can give you is get in touch and I will listen to understand exactly what it is that you need. And then we can provide you with that solution.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim, for joining. It was really lovely. Even I learned a lot during today's session. So if you guys are interested in learning more, I'm going to leave some links below the podcast, or you can go to our website or DM me. And I'm happy to refer you to Kim. Kim, again, thank you for today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope it's been useful.
It was. Thank you. Bye-bye.